The first petal emerged from Christopher Lee's left palm on a Tuesday morning, delicate as a whisper and white as funeral lilies. He was a maintenance supervisor for the city's underground transit system. A steady job, decent pay, enough to support his daughter's college fund and his mother's medication. Nothing spectacular. Nothing that prepared him for the small, translucent growth pushing through his skin like a question he couldn't answer. It didn't hurt. That was the worst part. The city had been changing for months. Ever since the vertical farms failed and the green spaces vanished beneath chrome and glass, people complained of feeling hollow. A word that appeared in therapy offices and support group circles with increasing frequency. Christopher had felt it too, that strange sensation of being a shell, walking through corridors of steel and synthetic light, breathing recycled air that tasted of nothing at all. Now the hollow places were filling. By Wednesday, 3 more petals had unfurled across his wrist. They moved when he moved, shifting like living tattoos, their veins pulsing faintly beneath his skin. At work, he wore long sleeves despite the humidity that clung to the tunnels like grief. His coworker, Janet, showed him her ankle, vines spiraling upward, thin as hair, beautiful as a lie. "They say it's adaptive," she murmured, her voice carrying that dreamlike quality he'd been hearing everywhere. "Our bodies remembering what we destroyed." The news called it floral integration syndrome. Scientists appeared on holographic broadcasts, their faces pixelated and distant, explaining cellular metamorphosis and environmental guilt made manifest. The flowers responded to emotion, they said, to memory, to the specific shape of each person's estrangement from the natural world. Christopher thought of his daughter, Emma, who had never seen a real forest, who had only known trees through virtual simulations and museum displays behind protective glass. By Thursday, the petals had spread to his shoulder. They bloomed in response to his thoughts, opening when he remembered his childhood garden, closing when he recalled the day the bulldozers came. At night, he could feel them thinking, processing something deep beneath his flesh, rewriting him in a language older than concrete and steel. Emma called that evening. Her voice trembled through the speaker. "Dad, they're beautiful," she said, and he could hear the tears. "Everyone at school. We're becoming gardens." The terror crystallized then, sharp and absolute. Not because of the flowers themselves, but because of the seduction in her voice, the way she said beautiful like a prayer. He checked the mirror after the call ended. Stems had erupted along his collarbone, tiny buds preparing to open. When he touched them, they responded, growing faster, eager, drinking something essential from his fear and transforming it into chlorophyll and hope. The city bloomed around him like a spreading infection of impossible beauty. People walked the streets with roses growing from their throats, orchids cascading down their spines, their eyes glazed with botanical rapture. Some stopped going to work entirely, standing in public squares as their bodies stretched upward, reaching for sunlight that filtered weakly through the perpetual smog. The plants were adopting them, reshaping human tissue into something that could survive without nature, or perhaps become nature itself. Christopher tried cutting the flowers away. He held a knife, hovering it above his skin, his hand shaking like wind through branches. But when the blade touched petal, he felt it. Not pain, exactly, but wrongness, as if he were attempting to sever his own thoughts. The flowers had rooted too deep. They weren't on him anymore. They were him. Friday morning, he woke to find his bedroom transformed. Vines had grown through the night, spreading from his sleeping body across the sheets. Up the walls, weaving through the ventilation system, his chest had split. Not bleeding, but opening like earth receiving seed. And inside, he could see green tissue pulsing where his lungs should be. He could still breathe, still think. But the thoughts were changing, slowing, becoming photosynthetic and patient. Emma appeared in his doorway, and Christopher felt his heart, or whatever remained of it, constrict. She was covered entirely now, a living sculpture of jasmine and forget-me-nots, her smile serene and alien and utterly content. "It doesn't hurt, Dad," she said, and her voice rustled like leaves. "We were so lonely before, so separate from everything. But now," she held out her hand, and he watched roots emerge from her fingertips, reaching toward him across the space between them. "Now we can finally belong." Christopher wanted to scream, to run, to tear the flowers from his flesh and reclaim what he'd been. But the petals were opening across his thoughts now, blooming through his memories, his fears, his love for his daughter, transforming everything into something else. Something that no longer remembered what it meant to be human. Something that had finally stopped feeling alone. The city bloomed and bloomed and bloomed. The alarm clock reads 6:47 a.m. when I wake, and I know, with the certainty of bone-deep dread, that something is wrong. I'm a high school English teacher, 34 years old, unmarried, living in a modest apartment that smells of coffee and old books. My biggest worry yesterday was whether I'd graded enough essays to hand back on Friday. Simple problems. Human problems. Now I can't remember what day it is. The sunlight slants through my bedroom window at the exact angle it did yesterday, or what I think was yesterday. The same dust mote spiral in the amber glow. The same crack runs along the ceiling above my bed, shaped like a question mark that's been asking me something I can't quite hear. I go through the motions, shower, toast. The news plays on my tablet, and the anchor discusses the mayor's speech with the identical cadence. The identical words, the identical pause before commercial break. When I check the date, it says Thursday, October 17th. It said that yesterday too. At school, I watch my students file into third period English with their Thursday faces. Bored, sleepy, checking phones beneath their desks. I teach The Great Gatsby again. Rebecca Martinez asks the same question about the green light. I give the same answer. The clock on the wall ticks through the same 43 minutes, and when the bell rings, it sounds like an echo of an echo of an echo. No one else notices. That's the terrible part. I try changing things. I take a different route home, stop at a coffee shop I've never visited, order something I've never tried. The barista, her name tag says Claire in cheerful letters, smiles the same smile, makes the same small talk, hands me the same cup. When I check my phone, it's Thursday again. October 17th, 6:47 p.m. The dread begins as a whisper in my chest, then grows into something vast and suffocating. By the 5th Thursday, or maybe the 50th, I've lost count, I notice the degradation. My students' voices sound tinny, like recordings played through damaged speakers. Their movements grow jerky, puppet-like, as if reality itself is running on failing batteries. When Michael Lewis raises his hand, I see his fingers blur slightly, existing in multiple positions at once. The world is losing resolution. I test it. I shout during class, overturn my desk, demand someone acknowledge that we're trapped. They stare at me with eyes that don't quite focus, mouths moving through scripted responses. "Are you feeling all right, Miss Warren?" They ask in unison, a chorus of concern that rings hollow as wind through empty rooms. That night, I don't sleep. I watch the clock approach 6:47 a.m., my heart hammering against my ribs like something trying to escape. When the alarm sounds, I smash it against the wall. The pieces reform. The alarm sounds again. Thursday, October 17th. The same. The terror becomes my companion. A cold, patient thing that sits in my chest and whispers truths I don't want to hear. I start noticing the gaps. The way conversations loop but never quite connect. The way people exist only when I'm looking at them, dissolving into suggestion and static when I turn away. The way the world beyond my immediate perception feels thin, translucent, like tissue paper stretched over nothing. I'm not repeating the day. I realize I'm reverberating through it. The memory comes gradually, reluctantly, like something surfacing from deep water. October 17th, the real one. The last one? I was driving home from school, thinking about lesson plans and weekend errands, and whether I should finally call my sister back. The truck rammed the red light. I remember the squeal of brakes, the sharp intake of breath that would be my last, the strange clarity of knowing I was about to die, but I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. Now I understand. The loops aren't trapping me in life. I'm trapped after it, a ghost so desperate to continue existing that I'm haunting my own final day, living it over and over, refusing to acknowledge what happened at 7:23 p.m. when metal met metal and everything stopped. The world around me isn't degrading. I am. Each repetition strips away another layer of my substance. My students are becoming shadows because I'm forgetting their faces. The coffee tastes like nothing because I no longer have a tongue to taste with. The apartment feels hollow because I'm no longer solid enough to fill it. I try to let go. I stand at my window on the 1001st Thursday and watch the sunset, trying to accept what I am, what I've become. But fear holds me here. Fear of the vast unknown beyond the single familiar day. Fear of stepping into whatever comes after. So I wake again. 6:47 a.m., Thursday, October 17th. My reflection in the bathroom mirror is fading now, transparent as glass, barely there at all. Soon I'll be nothing but intention. The ghost of a ghost, a woman who refused to leave, who clung so desperately to one ordinary day that she erased herself trying to keep it. The alarm will ring tomorrow, or today, or always. And I'll wake again, less than before, haunting the moment of my death because I'm too terrified to haunt anything else. The day never ends because I won't let it. The day never ends because ending means facing what I've been running from since 7:23 p.m. on a Thursday in October. The day never ends, but I'm ending anyway, one repetition at a time, fading into the terrible rhythm of my own refusal. The alarm clock reads 6:47 a.m., and I'm almost gone. The Harrington family bought the house on Maple Ridge for exactly 3 reasons. It was affordable, it was spacious, and Daniel had just been promoted to regional sales manager, which meant they could finally afford something better than their cramped apartment downtown. Stephanie stood in the foyer that first afternoon, watching autumn light filter through the tall windows, and felt something she couldn't quite name. Not unease, exactly. More like the sensation of being watched by something that hadn't yet decided whether to acknowledge her presence. "It's perfect," Daniel said, his voice echoing strangely in the empty rooms. Their daughter, Lily, was already running upstairs, her footsteps creating rhythms that seemed to linger along after she'd passed. They moved in on a Saturday, unpacked on Sunday. And on Monday morning, Stephanie woke to find the living room furniture rearranged. Not drastically, just enough to notice. The couch faced a different wall. The coffee table had shifted 3 feet to the left. Daniel insisted she was remembering wrong, that they placed everything exactly where it stood now. That Stephanie knew the geography of her own home, knew it with the certainty mothers develop from years of navigating dark hallways toward crying children. She said nothing. She was a part-time accountant, practical and measured, not given to flights of fancy. Houses didn't rearrange themselves. Memory was fallible. She must have been mistaken. By Wednesday, she couldn't find the photo albums. She'd unpacked them herself, placed them on the 3rd shelf in the study, right beside Daniel's engineering textbooks. Now the shelf held books she didn't recognize, their spines worn and titles written in languages that seemed to shift when she looked directly at them. When she asked Daniel about the albums, he stared at her with polite confusion. "What albums?" he said. "Our wedding photos." Lily's baby pictures. His expression remained blank, pleasant, utterly empty of recognition. "I don't know what you mean, Stephanie." The terror began as a cold thread in her spine, thin and sharp as wire. That night, she stayed awake past midnight watching. The house seemed to breathe around her, its walls expanding and contracting with a rhythm that matched no heartbeat she knew. At 12:01 a.m. exactly, she heard it. A sound like pages turning, like reality itself being edited and revised. She crept downstairs and found the living room transformed. The furniture stood in completely different positions. The walls were a shade darker. The photographs on the mantel showed scenes she'd never lived, moments that had never happened. In one, she stood alone at what might have been her wedding, but Daniel wasn't beside her. The space where he should have been was simply empty, as if he'd been carefully erased. When she turned, he was standing in the doorway, and his face held the same pleasant blankness. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Daniel, don't you see it? The room is different." "Different from what?" The question hung in the air like a noose. Different from what? Different from when? Her memory felt slippery now, unreliable, as if the house were teaching her not to trust her own mind. Thursday morning, Lily came downstairs for breakfast and sat at the table with the patient silence of a stranger. Stephanie studied her daughter's face, searching for something familiar, finding only smooth, polite distance. "Good morning," Lily said. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" "I always sleep well." The words carried no emotion, no inflection. Just statement, just fact. Stephanie reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. "Lily, do you remember last week? When we went to the park and you fell off the swings?" Lily tilted her head, a gesture that reminded Stephanie of something examining a specimen. "I don't remember parks. I don't remember swings." The threads of terror were weaving together now, forming a net that tightened around Stephanie's throat. She looked at Daniel, who smiled his empty smile and poured coffee with mechanical precision. That afternoon, while they were at work and school, Stephanie searched the house. She found rooms that hadn't existed the day before, hallways that led to doors she'd never opened. In the attic, she discovered a journal written in her own handwriting, filled with entries from years she couldn't remember living. The last entry, dated yesterday, read, "It feeds on connection. It keeps us lonely so it can keep us forever." She ran downstairs, clutching the journal, ready to show Daniel, to prove she wasn't losing her mind. But when she burst into the kitchen, he looked up from his newspaper with polite curiosity. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Daniel, it's me, Stephanie, your wife." He studied her face with the careful attention of someone trying to place a stranger. "I'm sorry. I think you have me confused with someone else. I live here alone." The journal in her hands was blank now, every page empty, every word erased. Stephanie felt it then, the house's hunger, patient and vast. It was consuming their bonds, their shared history, their love. Each midnight reset didn't just rearrange furniture. It rewrote relationships, cut off connections, isolated them in separate realities that happened to occupy the same space. She looked at her husband, at her daughter appearing in the doorway, and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. The house had already taken so much. Soon it would take their names, then their recognition of each other, then the memory that they'd ever been anything but alone. Midnight approached like a predator. Stephanie felt her own memories loosening, becoming negotiable, subject to revision. She tried to hold on to something solid. Daniel's laugh, Lily's first word, their anniversary dinner. But the house whispered its forgetting through every wall, and the memories dissolved like sugar in rain. The clock struck 12. The house rewrote itself, and Stephanie woke in a room she'd never seen, surrounded by strangers, unable to remember why their absence felt like grief.